that will determine your company's strategy, brand, innovation leading to growth. And culture is often misunderstood as that part of the business that belongs in HR. But that's not really the case. Culture is not a buzzword that needs to be adopted or it has to be adopted. It's neither a decorative office furniture that we need to have. You can have a great product and a great bank balance, but without culture, it's like a Ferrari without wheels. So it is imperative, and in fact is one of the most important drivers that needs to be set in order for an organization to achieve long-term sustainable growth. So let's start off by looking at a very typical work scenario where we have the boss asking, I want you to come up or find a bold and innovative way to do everything exactly the way it's been done for 25 years. So now what's wrong with that, right? And I'm sure this resonates with most of you, where you must have seen your boss is asking, hey, find innovative or come up with a creative solution, yet they're not open to new ideas or innovation itself. That's because the culture of the organization is such. So when you have an environment where culture is generally nurtured all the way from the CEO down, it creates a vibrant, healthy culture. And some of the key characteristics of a vibrant culture are focus. It provides focus for employees as they can focus towards the company's mission and vision. It provides motivation by building morale and loyalty. It also builds connection and cohesion across the various departments of the organization by providing consistency across the board. It encourages spirit. By shaping the behavior of the employees so that it creates a very efficient and alive environment. Drives innovation. It promotes or it encourages employees to get creative and think outside the box and come up with solutions that are different and new. And above all these factors combined created employee engagement. A culture where you have a culture that encourages innovation and growth definitely promotes employee engagement and connectivity to the organization. So now let's start off by looking at how corporate strategy and leadership impacts corporate culture. So what is corporate culture? Anyone? Anyone wants to take a shot? Anyone? Do I have to answer the question? No? Okay, I will answer it. So culture is basically the sum total of people's beliefs and attitudes based on their experiences. And in turn, that influences their behavior and willingness to work with or against an organization's systems and processes. So let's look at some of the factors that impact an organization, which impact the culture of the organization. So here around the triangle, we have attitude, behavior, systems, and processes, with leadership being in the center. So what is attitude? Attitude is basically what employees choose to say about their work and environment. Behavior is the way they interact with each other and whether they are willing to consistently deliver the desired results. Systems and processes are very important because if an organization has processes and systems that are easy to use and effective, it creates a very positive work environment, positive employee experience. Instead, if you have systems and processes that are cumbersome to use, there's a lot of red tapeism, a lot of bureaucracy, obviously, employees are not going to be happy and they're not going to have a good experience. In fact, it'll be a negative experience. And often, we can have an effective culture change by some thoughtful strategic planning and effective leadership. Or we can let the culture evolve over time based on employees' positive or negative experiences. And we don't want to have that, right? Because if we let it evolve, it can become a very negative environment. So we want to always actively cultivate actively cultivate the culture of the organization. And most organizations get it right. They start off by putting together a mission statement, set of values that they want everyone to follow, which are basically attitudes. They define a set of behaviors, competencies, and they even put together a lengthy list of processes, which they think will help make the culture change effective. But more often than not, we see that the culture change doesn't really last or take hold. Why do you think that is? Anyone? If you're listening, why do you think? The answer is on the presentation. Yes.
Being here with PMI, project management is the plan management of change. We're all here because we go after change. And you're saying that's not a good thing.
Sorry.
You're actually saying change is not a good thing.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I am saying that change should be actively cultivated. What I am saying that usually when organizations go through the culture change, it doesn't take hold. And I want to ask why? Why does that not last? Yes.
Because people are reluctant to change.
That is true. But yes, you're right. You're right. So leadership is at the center of all strategic decisions and establishment shifts. So leadership's attitudes, behaviors, and practices determine whether a culture change will happen or not. Right?
Yeah. What about trust? Shouldn't you have the trust?
That is where the leadership comes in, right? Leadership, when they, and we will talk about that in a minute, we'll get to that. That's a good point there. So, as I was saying, leaders is based on the leadership and their attitude and practices that absolutely need to change. And more often than not, we usually see that when we're ready, we have a plan and we're ready to implement it. The single most difficult challenge that we face is attaining that leadership improvement, right? Because, and usually change comes down to the fact whether people actually see that change in their leadership or not. And this is because leaders broadcast the change message. And they talk about what's important to them. They also talk about or believe what is important to the organization. But if they don't put that into practice, and if people don't see and hear, but if people see and hear is different than what they're being told, do you think that change will happen? Of course not, right? So leaders must actively pursue change in attitudes, behaviors, and norms in order to propel innovation and growth and improve employee engagement. And that also includes building the trust, owing whatever practices they put in place, they should lead from the front in order for employees to feel that this is something that they can do or they should do. So let's look at some interesting facts here. We have Gallup's latest research that shows, food that I love, good food, shows that only 31% of employees are engaged at work, which means 51% are disengaged and 17.5% are actively disengaged. Another analysis of the Glassdoor database shows that the average employee gives their company a C+, which is a 3.1 out of 5 when asked whether they would recommend their company to a friend. And that are some telling numbers of employee engagement and connection. And this is one of the main reasons why we see a lot of employee turnover. Another cultural influencer that affects culture and work in the workplace is diversity and inclusion. So diversity in a workplace determines the type of culture that a corporation will have, which in turn determines innovation and growth. And research shows compelling results that diversity promotes innovation and growth. So for the leaders, it should be a no-brainer, right? To embrace and embody the power of differences. And we have two kinds of diversity: inherent traits, which are what you're born with, like gender, race, ethnicity, and so forth. And then we have acquired traits, which are what you gain by experience. So for example, if you lived in another country, you have a better understanding of that culture and more tolerance for that culture. Or if you worked to sell, let's say, to a female audience, then you have gender smarts. So this diversity together is known as 2D diversity or two-dimensional diversity. And when leaders adopt this kind of 2D diversity, they create a powerful culture of tolerance for out-of-the-box thinking and groundbreaking ideas to be tried and tested. So here are some interesting facts around diversity. According to the Harvard Business Review, employees of firms with 2D diversity are 45% likelier to report a growth in market share over the previous year and 70% likelier to report that the firm captured a new market, which clearly shows that it's a no-brainer. Organizations should be adopting 2D diversity in their workplace. Culture fit. I'm sure you all have heard of this word. Now this someone should be able to define it. Can someone define what kind of culture fit?
Somebody that embodies the value system and mission and goals of the fabric of their organization.
Very good. Yes. Close, but very close, very close. So now let's look at what is culture fit and why it is important to have a healthy work culture. Yeah. So Laszlo Bock, SVP of People's Operation in Google, defines culture fit, or what he calls googliness, as not just being like everyone else, but rather sharing a set of traits that are common to them. And in Google, that means being comfortable with ambiguity and also bringing innovative ideas to the table without fear of rejection or reprimand. So usually we see that a culture is formed by its people, environment, and systems. But its impact is usually external on the stakeholders and customers, thereby forming a wider public perception. Simply put, your corporate culture determines your company's reputation, which can propel it to greatness or can simply destroy it. So it is extremely important for you all to pick and choose the companies that you work for. And vice versa, it is important for companies to hire people who align with their goals and missions and vision and traits. Similarly to basically a good culture fit. For example, if you are someone who believes in environmental preservation, then you will not be happy working for a company that does nothing for it or does not or affects environmental safety. Conversely, a company that produces products that affect environmental safety but does nothing to preserve it will probably have an uncaring culture, which will be reflected in its reputation and its employees' attitudes and performance. So through this picture, we can see that employees that are high on culture fit and higher performance are a no-brainer to hire, right? And across here, as visible, that employees with low culture fit and low performance, you don't need to hire right away. But the difficult choices come for companies at number 1 and number 2, where we have employees who are either higher in culture fit or higher performance and low on the other. So before I move on to the next slide, I'd like to ask you all, when you all research for companies or search for companies with a healthy corporate culture, what is it that you look for? Anyone?
Projects.
Okay, that's if you're consulting, but if you wanted to go work there, what is it that you look for in a healthy culture? Yes.
I would say diversity, the way they treat their employees.
Okay.
Is one of the things that we think about.
Okay.
The growth opportunities and growing within the company, how open it is to invest in the people.
Awesome, great.
Freedom of speech in that company, they can tell you ideas.
Very good.
I simply look for attention rate, because if they have low, that means that something is wrong.
Yeah.
When I was training my job years back, that was my main goal.
Okay, excellent. So do you all also look for companies that offer, let's say, game room, free gym membership, etc. And assume that they have a good, healthy corporate culture? Perhaps, right? Those are things that are important to us too, apart from the other things. So it's okay, but culture is not just about all fun and being part of a cool company. Culture is about, defining a unique vision, mission, and values that employees believe in, thereby creating a strong corporate brand. And when your corporate culture aligns well with your corporate brand, it forms a very powerful engine of competitive growth and advantage. And it doesn't matter what kind of environment or culture the organization has, whether it's competitive or nurturing, aggressive or easygoing, as long as the corporate culture aligns well with the corporate brand to form a guiding force, the organization will always win the competitive battle to win employees and customers and future-proof your business from downturn and failures. It will also show that the organization operates with integrity and authenticity. Corporate brand and corporate culture are synonymous, and people outside the organization recognize their employees through it. Therefore, it is very important to nurture that and nurture the employees by building trust and teamwork. Oh, and when companies offer or take extraordinary measures to offer these kind of perks such as gym or foosball table and free food and so forth to attract and retain talent, if their corporate culture does not align well with their corporate brands, then they'll be wasting a lot of money in the competitive one-upmanship for top talent. And usually these kind of perks, they sound good, but they may be producing a very generic fun environment. For example, social media startup Buffer struggles to gain profitability because of its generous cultural practices, which ate away at their cash flow, instead of building employees that were passionate about the brand and passionate about focusing on brand improvements. So when you have, and so we see that the culture and brand are closely knit and go hand in hand. And when you have an environment where quality of work and social responsibility is lauded and rewarded, we generally see high employee engagement and therefore innovation and growth. So now let's look at some common traits that companies with healthy corporate culture have. And these are traits no matter which industry these companies may be from, no matter what product or services they may be selling. So the first one is, of course, a powerful, charismatic leader with a sense of purpose and direction. Apple is an excellent example where leadership has played a powerful role in pushing technological advancements. Steve Jobs was passionate about innovation and improving customer experience, right? And getting excellence in customer experience. And it didn't matter what product, store, or employee, he inculcated those values across the organization that to this day helps with their constant technological challenging the technological boundaries. So they still come up with all new ways, right? Second is focus on innovation and creativity. Companies with a healthy corporate culture empower the employees to challenge themselves to come up with creative and new ways of finding solutions to problems. So like Boeing, IBM, Walt Disney, they all have the word innovation explicitly laid out in their mission and core value statement. Third is investing in employees' learning and development. So companies with a healthy corporate culture ensure that they have a robust learning and development program to not only improve the knowledge and skills of the employees, but also to reinforce behaviors that they want to ensure that all employees are following or showing. And when companies invest in building employee capability, employees usually feel more valued and therefore more committed to the organization. Cognizant Technologies. Yeah, Cognizant Technologies is an excellent example. They have a very robust learning and development program that aligns individual development plan to the organization's performance goals. Then employee pride and enthusiasm for the organization. So in companies with healthy corporate culture, employees actually enjoy going to work. They love what they do. And they speak highly of the work culture, environment, and the people that they work with. And they will willingly advocate for the organization. And usually, an employee's external attitude is a very good and accurate gauge of the internal culture. So when an employee has an external attitude towards their own organization that they work for, it is a great gauge of their internal culture. So when you all go to look for jobs, talk to employees that work in that organization. See how they say and what they say about the organization. That will tell you exactly how the culture of the organization is. And lastly, low turnover rate. Companies with a healthy corporate culture try to find out what the employees value most. It could be job security, it could be compensation, it could be flexible working hours, working virtually. And they usually find this out through surveys, performance reviews, and reward and recognition. And when they find out what is important and what the employees value most, they strive to achieve it. And that's what makes for a happy employee. And when the employees are happy, obviously the performance is higher, productivity is higher, leadership is happy. So we see that in employee engagement and culture are closely tied together. And as you must be hearing throughout the presentation, I've been also talking about employee engagement. So let's look at another work scenario with Dilbert. You all familiar with Dilbert? Yeah, of a work scenario. So here we have Dilbert's boss asking, we need to foster a culture of innovation. Does anyone have any ideas how we do that? And of course, Dilbert, being candid, says, well, you can give us less work and you can stop criticizing every idea that we have. So what does the boss say right away? Does anyone have a suggestion that is not ridiculous? Thank you. So what can be more discouraging and disengaging than that? I'm sure this resonates with most of you here. This is a very typical work scenario that causes employee disengagement. So let's look at some employee engagement facts. A recent Deloitte research shows that culture, engagement, and employee retention are now the top talent challenges for business leaders. And more than half business leaders weighed this issue as urgent, up from only 20% last year. So of course, leaders should focus on that and try to see what they can do to bring up employee engagement. So before we dive into it, now can anyone define for me what is employee engagement? Anyone? More train tickets? See, I'm trying to engage you guys. Employee engagement, okay? Tell me what is employee engagement mean? Oh my God.
Engaged employees that are more likely to stay happy, motivated, and committed to the organization.
Okay, I know you should try it out. Great. Well, we don't want you drunk, so no more tickets for you.
Team effort.
Okay, so someone else can get the answer. Yeah, okay, we'll get you a big ticket.
I don't know what I'm doing. I'm the voice of my people.
Okay, so employee engagement is nothing more than what an employee feels towards their job, and their understanding of the value that they contribute to the company's mission and goals. And when an employee understands the corporate culture, then he will understand what is expected of the employee more and also know what they're marching towards. And when employees are engaged, they're more happy, motivated, and more committed to the organization. So overall, engaged employees, we see are feel more connected to the company because they understand the company's mission and vision and goals. So therefore, they are more connected, and they are also more motivated to do their work or exceed the expectation and exceed their job expectations. They are also very proactive in their learning and development. They seek out new opportunities within the organization to take on more work and engage more with the corporation. They also obviously have a very positive attitude towards their work environment, and towards the other employees. They're also more creative and coming up with more innovative solutions as they feel more engaged. And lastly, of course, they are committed to the organization, so they stay in the organization to build a career within the organization. Okay, so here's another Gallup research, which shows that increasing your investment into engagement by 10% can increase your profits by $2,400 per year per employee. Highly engaged employees are 21% more productive, and 73% of disengaged employees are actively looking for jobs compared to 37% of engaged employees. So as you can see, we have a large workforce that are working but disengaged from their organization. So obviously, leaders have to look into that and do something about employee engagement. So as we saw that employee engagement affects productivity. So let's see what we need to do, or what are the factors that we can improve on to improve the performance of the employee. So first of all is work. And we did see that before in the presentation, that if within the organization, the systems and processes are difficult to use, or they are cumbersome and they're not well organized, it creates for a negative work environment. On the other hand, if the organization has everything organized and they have simple systems and processes, easy to use, employees can follow, it's a healthy work environment, of course, improving productivity. People, very important, right? In our organization, it depends on senior leadership, how they pursue employee engagement, engaging their employees across the organization, and how that message is being filtered down across the different levels of management, and whether it's coming down to the actual people and whether they are actually feeling connected. Because when they are feeling connected and engaged, performance will improve. Opportunities. How is an organization making the growth opportunities available to their employees? That there is no nepotism happening. Qualified employees are getting the right opportunities, and people who are looking to grow within the organization have that opportunity. So all of that definitely leads to a highly connected employee, leading to higher performance. Total rewards. So it's not just the compensation, but how is your organization sharing their profits with the employee in terms of bonuses, right? How are they recognizing anniversary awards? Because that's extremely important, because people with 5 years, 10 years anniversaries shows that those people are committed to your organization, and that they have consistently delivered results. So it's very important to have anniversary rewards. All of these things promote connection and high performance. Company practices, as we talked about, is the company being transparent? Is the communication correct? Do they have diversity? Are they aligning their brand? All those kind of practices promote employee engagement, which further promotes productivity. Quality of life. Is the organization recognizing work-life balance? Because when an employee takes care of their personal issues, only then they can focus fully on the professional life, which will then increase productivity. So it is very important for organizations to help employees and recognize and be sensitive of their personal time that they need to take care of their personal issues. So this leads us to what I call the ring of engagement, which starts off by value proposition of the employee understanding the value proposition of the company and the value that they deliver towards that value proposition. When they understand that, they feel connected and they feel more comfortable within the organization, which leads to employee well-being. And when the culture of the organization supports more relationship building, teamwork, and networking, it leads to further work satisfaction as employees work together, come up with new solutions, and this leads to further opportunities of growth, leading them to leadership positions. And of course, as they're going through this journey, they are also developing professionally and growing professionally, which then adds to the value proposition of the company, leading to further growth. And therefore, the circle or the ring of engagement continues. So now, let's look at a short video to reinforce the culture change and how that impacts innovation and growth.
Corporate culture can be compared to natural forces, such as winds and tides, which are there in the background, sometimes unnoticed, sometimes obvious. Made of instinctive, repetitive habits and emotional responses, a company's culture is a collection of self-sustaining patterns of behaving, feeling, thinking, and believing that determine the way we do things around here.
When an organization is at its best, a culture is going to energize its employees and it's going to make people feel good about what they do to advance the strategic and operating priorities of the company. It's really an emotional energizer that you can't get anywhere else.
At its worst, the culture can be a drag on productivity and emotional commitment, undermining long-term success.
Instead of trying to change culture significantly, it's much better to concentrate on changing the behaviors because they're more tangible and measurable. Cultures don't change automatically, but they do tend to follow behavior change.
Focus on the critical few, a select group of important behaviors that would have great impact if put into practice by a significant number of people. Find a few things that people do that positively affect business performance, such as ways of talking with customers or starting meetings. Make sure those things are aligned with the company's overall strategy. Check that people feel good about doing these things so that you tap into emotional commitment. Next, translate those critical behaviors into simple, practical steps that people can take every day. Finally, select a few employees who will respond strongly to the new behaviors and who are likely to implement and spread them. Companies can gain a competitive advantage when they focus on changing a few important behaviors, tap into the powerful force of employees' emotions, and enlist informal leaders.
So as we saw from the video and through the presentation, that culture change is complex, but its benefits are clear. And we know that culture change impacts or influences innovation and growth, which in turn influences employee behavior, turnover, and performance. Therefore, it is extremely important to keep a pulse check on the health of your company's culture. Ignoring the health of your organization's culture is like letting weeds grow in a well-kept garden. So to sum it up, I would say culture is that environment in which your organization can either take off into growth and innovation, or it can be left behind like a Ferrari without wheels. Your call. Thank you. Any questions? No, I've explained it so well.
Another question that we didn't touch on, what do you think the impact of working remotely, what the impact is to corporate culture?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So the question was, what is the impact of working